Welcome, everyone. We have a lot of material to cover today, so welcome to the 2021 Nonprofit Trend webinar. Would have really loved to do this in person, but unfortunately, due to the fun times that we find ourselves in, we have to do this on a webinar basis. I do really miss the interaction with all of you. It's great trying to do this in a way that we can chat and stuff, but it's still, it kind of feels flat to me, and I kind of like the whole interaction with the audience. But so let's get started. Like I said, we have a lot of material to cover today. So if we look at our overarching trends that are happening within the nonprofit sector here for 2021, obviously the coronavirus is going to continue to take center stage in terms of what's going on. Most doctors are predicting that the pandemic will continue well past the midpoint of the year. So do expect that this is going to be a key thing that we will be grappling with throughout 2021, or a big chunk of 2021. That means we're going to continue to have an impact on our fundraising efforts, our work patterns, management time and resources, and how management's going to have to interplay with the pandemic. All of these things are going to continue to be a challenge into the beginning of the year. We've been talking about a new normal and what that new normal is going to look like. And I think the reality of the situation is I think every organization has to kind of focus on what its new normal is, given the fact that the world is never going to go back to where it was. And even if we do get a vaccine for the coronavirus, and that vaccine, everybody gets vaccinated before the end of the year is out, there's still going to be some trepidation in terms of how operations go on going forward. So I think we are going to continue to see an impact of the coronavirus no matter what. I think you're going to see, as part of that new normal for each organization, I think you're going to see smaller footprints in terms of space that organizations are using. I think a lot of organizations have seen that they can function effectively with smaller space. And I think you're going to see organizations cut back on the amount of space that they're using. I think, if nothing else, 2020 was a tremendous year in terms of technology, and the nonprofit sector, who historically has been well behind the times from a technology perspective compared to the for-profit sector. I think the nonprofit organizations have made up some of that ground. There's been a tremendous level of use of technology and investment in technology by the nonprofit sector, and that's going to continue on into 2021. Telehealth and teleservices are things that became big in 2020 as education went to remote learning, and therapy went to remote therapy, and there's been a lot more electronic means of delivering services. And I think that's going to be part of the new normal model going forward. And there's going to be some way that telehealth and teleeducation, all those things are going to be here to stay in some aspects going forward. Again, it's going to take a while before people feel comfortable going back out into the world and coming together again. So there's going to need to be some level of remote things occurring, including virtual fundraising is going to continue for a while. We'll see, we've been seeing increased levels of isolationism and anxiety. And I think that increased levels are going to continue in through 2021, especially since we're seeing an uptick in the number of cases of the COVID pandemic. I don't know about you guys, but everybody I talk to knows somebody who has it or has had it in the last week. So definitely a big uptick happening there. You're going to see in the nonprofit organizations, you're going to see a change in organizational focus as nonprofit organizations, again, they look to find different ways to strategically run their business and strategically deliver services in more creative and innovative ways than they've had to in the past. You're going to see hybrid services and hybrid fundraising taking place, where there's going to be aspects of both in-person and remote happening. And I think you're going to see increased focus on diversification and leadership within leadership and the boards. And that's something that we're definitely going to be seeing a push in terms of that. Organizations need to remain dynamic and flexible. Every day brings with it new adventures. There seems to be changes in regulations. Today it's the vaccine. Who knows what tomorrow's issue is going to be? But every time there's a new issue, there's new regulations that organizations have to stay on top of and make sure that they understand what's happening with them. Government funding cuts are continuing. I mean, look at New York State has a pretty sizable shortfall, and we'll talk about that in a little while. I don't think it's as steep as Governor Cuomo is claiming the shortfall is. I think there's been some positives that have helped close some of those shortfall gaps. But even so, there's been 20% cutbacks in the nonprofit sector, and unless there's some additional federal aid, which hopefully there will be to get some of that money back to the nonprofit sector, that's something we're going to have to continue to watch and is going to have an impact on the sector for 2021. No more business as usual, unless usual means completely different. Things are going to, the one thing we can say about, life under COVID is it's ever changing, ever difficult. And again, I don't think that there's going to be anything usual anymore. And I think organizations are going to, as I said earlier, be creative and find out what their new normal is and what's going to work for them. We're going to see an increased level of collaboration. We're already seeing it. There's been talk for years now about, nonprofits increasing the number of partnerships and mergers that are taking place within the sector. And that hasn't necessarily been as rapid as everybody had thought over the last couple of years. But as government funding dries up, as organizations are finding it tougher and tougher to raise money, you're just going to see more and more of that collaboration, back office function, mergers taking place. And now more than ever, you need to stay connected and informed. There's so much that's happening within the nonprofit sector. It's very, very important to get involved in different trade associations and following through with your trade associations to see what's happening with your unique funding sources, or look for trade groups that are helping. There's a new organization out there, the Nonprofit Resource Hub, which is one of our partners for this presentation. And through the Nonprofit Resource Hub, if you go to their website, there's a ton of information within the Nonprofit Resource Hub website that you can gather, and you can go through some of their seminars and stuff. But information is going to be exceedingly more important to be able to stay informed. We don't know what we don't know. And if we're not staying informed, we are destined to have some problems. I was on a phone call today with one of my clients, and he wasn't aware that there are certain credits available for payroll taxes for individuals who have had the COVID pandemic, and he's paid several of his employees for work that they've performed, but they not performed, but paid their salary while they were out on COVID, and he didn't know he could get a credit for it. So there's a lot of information out there, and you just got to know to ask the right questions and stuff. I think we have another question that we can kind of throw up on the screen. After the pandemic, do you anticipate keeping a portion of your business remote? How many of you think are going to be doing some of it remote, and how much of you think you're going to go back to kind of doing things more in person? 83% of you guys think you're going to keep things remote, and 17 are going to look to go back in person. And I think that's going to be the trend. I think there's going to be remote aspects of everything we do on a go forward basis. And I think, again, it's going to be important. All right, so let's look at the state of the state. So as I said earlier, New York State has significant budget shortfalls. In October, when New York State issued its mid-year report, New York State said that there was going to be an $8.2 billion shortfall for 2021 and a $16.7 billion shortfall for fiscal 2022. There's been some additional federal aid that came in the December package, which is the new CARES Act package that came out in December. There's been an increase in some of the state revenues. They went back and they recalculated, and they figured that they're going to do a little better than they had thought they were going to do. There's an additional 3.8 billion they're expecting for 2021 and 4.2 billion in 2022, which will help to reduce some of that. The stock market has been doing very, very well, which hopefully will help to close some of those shortfalls. We're also hoping that there will be additional federal aid coming through the new administration. How much of that will come to New York State is a question, but I know that Governor Cuomo is expecting a large amount, so hopefully that will come and will help to alleviate some of those 20% holdbacks that are currently happening. So far, the state has held back more than $3 billion from localities, school districts, nonprofits, state vendors, and state operation spendings, including employee raises and stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of that come back to the nonprofit sector. Also, the state is exploring legalized recreational marijuana and gambling to help close some of those budget gaps. While that could be beneficial in terms of dollars, it just really opens up more concerns and social issues that the nonprofit sector is just going to have to grapple with on a go-forward basis. So again, 2021 is going to be an interesting year in terms of funding, something that we're going to have to keep watching and monitoring in terms of the state budget, and hopefully, again, some of those shortfalls will find a way to be eliminated. While this is a trend report in terms of where we think 2021 is going, there is some new stuff happening with respect to the CARES Act and PPP. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I know we've done presentations on this in the past, but I do want to talk about some of this stuff because, again, the nonprofit sector is in dire need of funds, and this has opened up some new avenues for funding for the nonprofit sector. So there's a round 2 of the PPP funds for those organizations that have seen a 25% drop in their revenue for at least one calendar quarter of 2020. So you're comparing the first quarter of 2020 to the first quarter of 2019, the second quarter of 2020 to the second quarter of 2019, on through the end of the year. And if you have at least one quarter where you've had a drop of 25% or more, you're eligible for the next round of PPP funding. A lot of the banks have already opened up their the ability for you to apply for it. So some of the bigger banks still haven't, but some of the smaller banks have definitely have the application online already. It's for organizations that have less than 300 employees. That 300 employees is an aggregate. So if you have multiple entities, you have to consider both the 25% drop and the 300 employees from an aggregated basis. You had to have used all of your prior funds. It doesn't mean you had to have asked for forgiveness yet. It just means you had to have utilized the funds under the SBA guidelines. The new round is limited to $2 million, and they have expanded the use of the funds to include things like accountants, payroll services, some software. So there are some additional uses of the funds, and those additional uses are retroactive to the first PPP funds that came out last year. So something, and also PPE is also included in the PPP now. So those are things you should go back and look at. Unemployment insurance for those organizations that are self-insured. The 50% federal subsidy has been extended through March 14th of 2020. And for those of you who are paying into the state system, remember that you're not required to pay in 100% of the amount that of the unemployment. You're only required to pay in half. You can hold back the 50% that the federal government is supposed to subsidize. Otherwise, if you pay in the whole thing, you're going to have to wait for the money to come, and that may take some time. The Employee Paid Sick Leave Act, this is what I was talking about earlier, where you have the ability to get refunded up to 80 hours or get a credit for up to 80 hours cumulative of sick leave that you pay for an individual who was impacted due to COVID. That has been extended through March 31st, 2021. Employers do not have to extend past December 31st. They can elect not to, but an employer can elect to extend through March 31st, 2021. And they can continue to apply for the credit, but you have to remember that the credit is accumulation or cumulative of 80 hours entirely for each individual who works for you. A couple other things I want to touch on really quick. HHS funding. So it says here, quick reminder that you need to file by February 15th, but as of yesterday, that changed. So you no longer have to file by February 15th. The application actually isn't even out yet. It was supposed to come out last Friday, but it never came out. The portal has been open, but the application's not available yet. So they're going to extend the due date of the application for the forgiveness under the HHS funding. That's anybody who got Medicaid or Medicare funding. So that has been extended. We don't know when the extension is going to go through. Nothing has come out yet, so it's not yet available. And we are anticipating, I did have a phone call with HHS, and we are anticipating a fourth round of funds to be made available of HHS funding. A couple other things. There's the employee retention tax credit. The employee retention tax credit has been around since the first round of the CARES Act back in April of last year, but it really wasn't a big deal because if you got the PPP funding, you couldn't also get the employee retention tax credit, and it wasn't as attractive a vehicle as the PPP. Well, for now, the new regulations, they've come out and said you can get both the employee retention tax credit and the PPP. So you can actually go back to last year. Last year's not really attractive if you have more than 100 employees. If you have less than 100 employees, there might be something you can do with the employee retention tax credit last year. But if you have more than 100 employees, very little benefit that you can get unless you paid people to do absolutely nothing. And if you did, or you put people on furlough and continued to pay their health benefits, in those cases, you could get a benefit for last year. The bigger benefit is for this year, 2021. If you have a 20% decline in revenue between the first quarter of 2021 and the first quarter of 2019, or the second quarter of 2021 and the second quarter of 2019, you could be eligible for the employee retention credit. Again, the threshold here is unlike the PPP, which has a threshold of 300. Here, the threshold is 500 employees. And you could qualify for up to 70% of qualified wages and health benefits paid to each employee, up to $7,000 per employee per quarter. So, this really was expanded. It's much better than it was last year. And again, it really comes down to if an organization has a 20% decline in revenue or more. Just so that people have access to it, we did issue certain guides that talk about all of the tax credits through the employee retention tax credit and the PPP changes and everything else, and some of the impacts on the nonprofit sector. You can click on these, or you can get copies of them. They're on our website. So feel free to grab them, read them, and make yourself familiar with them. There's a lot of good information there that, and if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. All right, so let's talk about some of the trends. Well, obviously some of the biggest trends we're seeing in some of the areas that nonprofits have been grappling with is in the area of fundraising and communication. The pandemic has definitely put a damper on the ability for a lot of nonprofit organizations to do those in-person fundraising. A lot of the galas and the golf outings and everything else have had to be either canceled, or there's been a pivot to move events to online. So it's been much more difficult, and it's been harder for organizations to bring in much needed discretionary funding. So what do organizations need to do, and what sort of trends are we anticipating happening in the nonprofit sector for 2021? I think the first thing is donors are really interested in understanding how nonprofit organizations have pivoted during the pandemic. How did you remain relevant? So when we look at nonprofit organizations and we look at your organization, how did you remain relevant? How did you meet the changing needs of your consumers? So, as things change and you're now, need to focus on things differently, what is it that you're doing? How are you doing things differently? How are you staying important? How have your operations improved and become meaningful during the pandemic? So I think donors are very, very interested in understanding that. You have to realize that donors have a shorter and shorter attention span. When we look at, the different levels of donor, different age groups of donors, It seems like the millennials and Generation Z, which are the two younger generations, clearly, these are generations that grew up with the internet. These are generations that grew up with computers and stuff. It's instant gratification. It's show me impact succinctly. They want to see things like through infographics or pictures or videos. It's a much more quicker and succinct way of reaching out to people. So again, looking at the populations that you're going after, you got to kind of figure out how you're going to be able to go after those types of populations. Actually, one of the things I wanted to mention, going back to that first thing, how did organizations pivot? Did want to tell a little story. I mean, one of the applicants for the Imagine Awards this year was a small organization out on the East End called East End Food Institute. And one of the things that this organization did was, they were looking at the fact that there was a lot of food insecurity out on the east end of the island. A lot of the food pantries had a breakdown in their supply chain as restaurants and stuff closed. So they didn't have access to a lot of the food that they normally had. In addition, you had a lot of the farmers, inventors, and fishermen who were bringing in product or growing food and didn't have an avenue to sell to because the restaurants were closed. So what East End Food Institute did was they hired some staff from closed restaurants. They opened up a kitchen. They cooked a bunch of food that was they were able to get from the local suppliers, and they provided the food to the food pantries and stuff to not impact the food pantries in terms of having them cook the foods and stuff, but making sure that they had the foods and stuff that were needed. So again, looking at a creative way to pivot and utilize resources during the pandemic. So that was kind of cool. Personalize your message. One size does not fit all. I mean, we have seen that organizations that are able to personalize their message and deliver targeted messages wind up with a much better response rate in terms of fundraising. The statistic is about a 40% better donation level if you are targeting your donations than when you don't. So as part of that also is you want to try to maximize your donor experience. What is your donor feeling from all of this? Is it a positive experience? Is it not a positive experience? What differentiates your organization from everybody else? Everybody's out there, a lot of organizations out there trying to raise money. Why should somebody give to you and not to another organization? I'll give you kind of a little story here. This past December for the holidays, we gave out 10 checks to smaller nonprofit organizations. And we mailed those out around or put it on the paid through the website of nonprofits. We did that around the 14th or 15th of December. Of those 10 donations, I got 3 personal messages from executive directors of the organizations that we contributed to. I got 6 generic letters, basically thanking me for my donation. And here we are now, midway through the month of January, and there's been no other communication with any of the organizations. And I'm not saying that I want every organization to pamper me. The checks weren't that big. They range between $250 and $500. But again, there needs to be that ongoing communication. There needs to be some level of engagement that makes me feel like my contribution was important, lets me know how my money was being used. And I think you're seeing more now where donors are doing seed donations and really trying to understand if the organization kind of aligns with their thought process and whether there's that engagement that exists with nonprofit organizations. So I think that's something that's extremely important on a go-forward basis. You need to keep that open engagement with the donors that are providing money to you. Make it personal, less transactional. Consider doing backstage tours or inviting people into your organization. And it doesn't have to be in person. It could be electronic, or, where it's a video or something. But I think you want to kind of create some level of fun and interest and engagement with your donors. You also want to look for better linkage of donations to impact. The old thing of $25 feeds a family for a week, $500 provides family shelter for a month. People want to see how their money's being used. People want to be able to equate the money that they're giving you to some sort of positive outcome. One of the other things we're seeing is increased use of artificial intelligence powered personalization. So basically there's AI that can be utilized to go through your CRM systems and go through and make sure that you can really get a better understanding of why people have given to you, what campaigns have been successful, what's worked, so that you can better target your appeals to your donors. Sorry, next up. I think it's important also to know your target market. When you look at social media, there are different social media marketplaces that kind of work with different age groups. And you can see, your 18 to 29-year-olds, 90% of 18 to 29-year-olds are online and using social media on a regular basis. 82% from age 30 to 49 are using it, 69% from 50 to 64, and about 40% over 65. So when you think about the different types of social media that are out there, you want to target the populations that you're trying to serve, and each type of social media is going to target things differently. So you have TikTok, which is one of the newer types of social media that's out there. It was actually the #1 downloaded social media platform during 2020, and actually they've come out with a new TikTok for Good, which is a community-focused, nonprofit-focused component of TikTok. TikTok is going to be more towards your 18 to 29-year-old population. Facebook continues to be the most widely used platform. Facebook Fundraiser is still a very, very strong resource that the nonprofit sector can utilize. Facebook is, when you look at 18 to 49-year-olds, which is your first two categories, 79% of all 18 to 49-year-olds use Facebook. Instagram is more for the younger population, the 13 to 17-year-olds, about 72% of them use Instagram. 18 to 29-year-olds, about 67% of them use Instagram. LinkedIn is more of the, for the business community. You're seeing more of that as a business community. And the biggest population there is your 30 to 49-year-olds. It's about 37% of them. One thing, though, is only about 9% of people who use LinkedIn go on LinkedIn more than one time a day. So it's not something that people are regularly going on like some of the other platforms that are out there. You also have things like Twitter, Twitch. Twitch is for gaming. Snapchat is more geared towards the younger generation. YouTube is a big one. I don't have YouTube here, but YouTube is something that's been definitely gaining momentum. YouTube, 13 to 17-year-olds, 85% of them utilize YouTube. 18 to 28-year-olds, it's 91%. 30 to 49-year-olds, it's 87%. And 50 to 64-year-olds, it's 70%. So a lot of people are using YouTube, which again goes back to the whole thing that videos are becoming extremely more important in terms of marketing and how nonprofits can reach out to the sector. We have another question that I'd like to throw up. So which social media platforms are you currently actively using? So you see the biggest one that the nonprofit sector is using is Facebook. 89% of you are using Facebook. 64% are using Instagram. A few of you are trying out TikTok and Snapchat. No one's really using Twitch. Again, Twitch is more for gaming. Twitch is actually owned by Amazon. If you have the gaming population, it's definitely a good resource. 63% are using LinkedIn, and Twitter about 44%. Twitter, though, has lost a little bit of steam over the years. So, I mean, again, I don't know that everybody has enough energy and time to be able to focus on every single type of social media on a regular basis. So I think you need to pick and choose. And I think, part of this that I wanted to kind of stress is the fact that, it's important to understand who you're trying to go after, what platforms those populations are viewing on a regular basis, and then how can you effectively reach them through the different social media platforms. As I mentioned, videos are extremely important. Videos will make up more than 82% of all online traffic next year, according to Cisco. So I don't know how many of you are already utilizing videos in your reach out to the nonprofit sector. Can we throw up the next question? So what percentage of people who watch a nonprofit video do you think make a donation? So if you had to pick, what percentage do you think of nonprofit organization, what percentage of people who watch a nonprofit video actually contribute after they watch the video? Most people thought it was 20 to 30%. The correct answer is 57%. So 57% of all people who watch a video, nonprofit video, are actually going to make a donation afterwards. So again, I think videos are extremely important. Videos are extremely powerful. I think if we can add a request for a donation after a video, and when we look at videos, I mean, things like sharing snippets of your story, show programs in action, let organizations in behind the scenes and let them see what you're doing. Let them meet some of the staff and the people that you serve. Let them see some of the difficulties and tender moments that exist within your organization. I mean, I think some of that stuff is extremely important and powerful. Tap into some of the celebrities and influencers out there. Consider, live streaming campaigns. There's a lot of different things that you can do as, an organization to kind of pull people in through video. One of the things that we've thrown in here is we if you look at this blue box here, the click to read, this is I thought a pretty decent article on the ultimate nonprofit video marketing strategy. So we kind of gave you a little post here that you can kind of go back and read to see if you can use and get a little more insight into how to do videos. We're not talking about something that's going to require a lot of high-end equipment. You can do a lot of it just using your phone, but it's just really a matter of getting out there and getting people to better understanding of what you're doing as an organization using videos, because again, videos are a lot more powerful. Some of the other trends we're seeing from a fundraising communication perspective is increased levels of social entrepreneurism. I think businesses are becoming much more socially responsible. Consumers are demanding it. We're seeing, consumers, people want to know that businesses are socially conscious. And if businesses aren't socially conscious and businesses aren't giving back, the consumers are going to be less likely to buy from them. So I think it's really consumers that are kind of pushing the charge in terms of business social responsibility. And, you've seen these global social justice movements. So consumers are looking for businesses to take a stand. I think that's a good thing for the nonprofit sector, because it means then that there are businesses that are going to be much more receptive. And I think nonprofits need to find ways to open up lines of communication and effectively partner with businesses. And those organizations that can find ways to effectively partner with businesses are going to do well in 2021. I think also what you're finding on the nonprofit side is nonprofits are incorporating much more by way of business concepts to become more scalable and sustainable as an organization. And I think that's important. I think nonprofits are looking to try to monetize some of the business relationships that they have. I think they're looking to try to create, where possible, business ventures or other ways that they can make money as opposed to just fundraising and donations. As I said, you want to find ways to creatively partner with your business donors. The expectation is, and donations from businesses have always been one of the smaller areas of contributions for the nonprofit sector, but corporate giving is predicted to increase by 1.4% in 2021 because of that whole need for increased social responsibility. So we are seeing an uptick in corporate giving that's happening because, again, businesses need to in order to stay viable. Virtual events, as I said, are here to stay. You have the ability to hold multiple or have multiple touches throughout the year instead of one gala. 56% of all virtual event organizers claim that they actually met their goal during the year. And again, I think you need to try to find events that engage attendees. It's tough, but you got to find some way to kind of keep some level of open communication and some level of engagement with the attendees of your events. One of the things that we were involved with this past year was the book fairies last year did a readathon, and what that readathon was they for the month of July they raised awareness of reading and the need for reading. They brought in authors, local authors and national authors. They brought in some local talent to read books to kids and families throughout the month, and they were able to raise $60,000 or more than $60,000 from the event, which for book fairies was a fairly large event. And they were also able to increase the amount of people who visited their website, who utilized or viewed them through social media and everything. They had a lot more followers and everything else. So it was very, very successful event, and it's something they're going to continue to do on a go-forward basis. So again, I think you just need to continue to look for ways to be creative in those virtual events. Also look to find ways to engage your volunteers. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest issues the nonprofit sector has had this past year in 2020 is they really weren't able to find ways to effectively engage volunteers. So you've got all these volunteers and they weren't really utilizing the volunteers to their maximum potential. So try to find ways to get your volunteers more involved with your organization. When you look at the Gen Zs and millennials who are very, very strong with computers and stuff, try to bring them in, let them, do some of your social media for you, help with videos, graphic designing, maybe develop some apps that might be interesting, or you can try to monetize some of the apps and stuff. But kind of take a look to see how you can effectively utilize volunteers out there now, because again, they're not being effectively utilized up as of 2020. Some of the things that we've seen, there was a survey that was done, and this was of membership organizations, so it's a little different from regular flat-out nonprofits, but membership organizations, what they did is they ended up having a lot more events than they had traditionally had in the past, and you can see that 7 to 10, 11 to 15, and 16 plus virtual events were the biggest categories, accounting for combined 68% of all of the events. Very few organizations just did one event. And I think that's what you're seeing now is virtual events take a lot less time to do. They don't bring in as much money, but they're cheaper and you can kind of get them off the ground a lot faster. The largest increase that we saw in these types of events were webinars and educational events, and the largest decrease from in-person was the galas and stuff. Because again, I think a lot of organizations were struggling with how to do a virtual gala where it became interactive and fun as opposed to just flat. A couple other quick things from a fundraising perspective. There seems to be no offline or online anymore. So you just need to make sure that you keep your messaging consistent across all platforms. I think, as I said earlier, I think you're seeing an uptick in virtual and augmented realities. So, again, if there's ways that you can kind of utilize virtual tours, let's say, of cultural organizations and things like that, where, you can kind of utilize some of the newer technology out there, that would be cool. E-commerce is growing exponentially. We're seeing many nonprofits have started to create online stores to sell organizational branded products or donated goods. It used to be that you had an online auction at your fundraising event. You can now set up online auctions throughout the year and sell throughout the year, as opposed to waiting for an event to occur. So kind of different ways of thinking about things. Donors and volunteers like to know how their efforts made a lasting difference and how their contributions are being used. So again, I think there needs to be a little bit more in terms of providing information and transparency to donors and volunteers. Monthly donations are still on the rise. Something that we're still seeing growth in is the whole aspect of monthly donations. And again, we did give you a little click to view, good article on 9 ways to promote and encourage monthly giving on your website. One of the other things, I mentioned it earlier, it's not here, but the stock market has done very, very well. Last year, 19 was strong, 20 was even stronger. It hit new heights in 20. And so far this month, the market has done very, very well. Not sure how many of you have brokerage accounts established, but if you can get or solicit contributions of stock as opposed to cash, the benefit to your donor is if a donor gives appreciated stock, they get a tax deduction for the full value of the appreciated stock, and they don't have to pick up the capital gain. So if you've got someone who purchases stock for $5,000 and that stock is now worth $30,000, they could donate that $30,000 worth of stock to you. They get a $30,000 tax write-off, and they don't have to pick up the $25,000 gain between what they paid for it and what it's worth now. So something that organizations should think about. They should think about the possibility of looking at donations of stocks in terms of that. I know there were a couple questions. Somebody had asked about the slides and whether these slides are available. They are. In the chat is a link to the slides. And somebody else asked about forgiveness of the PPP2. And yes, there is a forgiveness, just like the first round of PPP funds were forgivable. So is the second round. A lot of the rules are the same. All right, we're going to move on from fundraising. We're going to look at some of the trends in operations. So, one of the things that we've been telling our nonprofit clients is for 2021, use this as a year to regroup, refocus your mission, and communicate your intentions to stakeholders. I mean, one of the things that we've been seeing out there is over the years, organizations went through a certain level of mission creep, where they expanded their mission beyond what they really were designed to do. And I think now is a good time to go back and really start looking at what is your mission. Does your mission continue to discuss what you do as an organization? Have you grown outside your mission? Should you have grown outside your mission? And kind of look at all of those factors to see what you should be doing as an organization. I think organizations need to be proactive and not reactive. I think the natural tendency is to, as cutbacks occur, to react to those cutbacks and try to grab dollars wherever they are. But I think organizations need to really think about what direction they want to move in as an organization and focus their growth and focus their plan on that. Now's a good time to be doing strategic planning as an organization. I don't know when the last time some of you have done strategic planning, but if it hasn't been in a while, you should definitely consider that so that you can create your new normal. Many nonprofits will be looking to find ways to streamline operations. I mean, again, with government cutbacks continuing, some drops in fundraising dollars, you got to continuously look for ways to do business smarter. As I mentioned earlier, you got to consider your new realities. Do you really need the same level of physical space that you did in the past, or would it be better for your organization to invest more money in technology and be able to do things more virtually, but have better systems, controls, better information, better integration? Should you be hiring or utilizing back office staff for things like HR, accounting, CRM, or is that something you might want to think about potentially outsourcing either to another nonprofit partner or to a for-profit business? With the moving to a virtual environment, one thing that I think it's definitely taught us is that, we're not tethered anymore to a geographic area where maybe our corporate headquarters are. I think we've seen that people can work effectively remotely, which then opens up a lot more avenues for nonprofits to bring on resources that aren't necessarily near their offices. And you can bring on expertise anywhere. So you don't have to necessarily think about hiring locally anymore. You can really look at what are the best resources that I need for my organization, and how do I, bring on appropriate staff members that could be anywhere now, and not just here in, on Long Island or in New York State. And as I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to see increased collaboration in the sector. We've been talking about it for a while, but shared services, joint programming, and even some level of consolidation and merger. I think there's a lot of nonprofit organizations out there. There's a lot of duplicative effort in terms of nonprofit organizations. And I think if you can find ways where, organizations can come together, they can talk, they can share ideas, I think you're ultimately going to get to a point where, you'll be in a better place for the sector where there's, increased collaboration and sharing and even mergers. And that's not a bad thing, having organizations merge. I'd rather see organizations merge and come together and be able to continue to provide services than organizations not be able to make it and close. From a technology perspective, 5G is going to make communication so much more easy than it ever did before, which means that smartphones are going to be the primary source of people coming into the internet and viewing nonprofit organizations than ever before. There's 271 million smartphone users expected in the US by 2022. So you're really seeing many, many more uses of iPads, smartphones, tablets than ever before, which means that from a mobile fundraiser, text to donate type stuff, that's something that you have to make sure that your website is viewable on mobile devices. You want to make sure that, you're utilizing mobile devices to incorporate mobile devices into your fundraising efforts. Mobile video content has been increasing by 100% per year. So you want to make sure that if you're doing mobile video content, that yours is seamless and it's easy for people to see. There's been new volunteer management systems that have been created for mobile phones so that you can track your volunteers, communicate with your volunteers, set up seamless systems with your volunteers. So those are things that nonprofits should look into. SMS marketing is on the rise. SMS marketing is using mobile phones or marketing through the mobile phones. So it's pushing information out to your contacts, things like texts or videos, keeping your network in tune with important information. So if you've got expertise within a particular field, if things are happening around where your expertise is, you should be regularly communicating with your donors, with your constituents, with your contacts, so that people look at you as an expert and they rely upon you to provide them with information. And you want to keep people engaged and coming back. That's the important part. We're seeing an increase in technology spending by the nonprofit sector. 2020, there was more money spent on technology in 2020 than any other year in the nonprofit sector, and we're expecting to see that continue in 2021 as that gap gets closed in terms of nonprofits being behind the times from a technology perspective. And when we talk about technology spending, we're seeing it in back office systems to allow more remote services to occur. We're seeing enhanced and innovative service delivery, utilizing new types of technology. We've seen some really cool stuff with augmented reality and stuff. So that's really cool. That's happening out there. We're seeing use of technology for staff training and ensuring staff competencies are in place. The one thing to keep in mind, though, as we do see an increase in technology and we start seeing more and more people, working remotely and tapping into their own personal computer systems and, using their own hardware to tap into your network, it opens up a lot more cybersecurity concerns. So one of the things you do want to make sure is that if you are utilizing individuals or your employees' equipment, that equipment is properly being serviced by your IT consultant or your IT solutions, so that you don't open up any holes within the system. Oops, sorry, what just happened there? So that you don't open up any holes in the system due to cybersecurity. And then we're seeing an enhanced reliance on cloud-based solutions. So more and more software applications are moving away from desktop solutions and moving more and more towards cloud-based solutions, which means that organizations are getting updates on a more regular basis, better technology, and better support than they have in the past. Some of the significant challenges we're seeing from a staffing perspective, and this was a survey that was done by PNP Staffing. So they saw that the biggest areas of challenge were the inability to hold in-person programs, events, and conferences. It comes down to how do you keep people engaged? If you can't be in person, the big challenge is how do you keep engagement? How do you effectively manage remote workers and workforce? And that again also has to do with engagement and firm culture, and your nonprofit has a certain culture attached to it, and how do you keep that culture intact when people aren't coming together? How do you share ideas effectively? I find that organizations are spending so much more time meeting to just try to stay on top of what's happening from a regulatory basis, that some of the stuff that's been suffering has been that kind of that whole culture that's been established over the years. Sustainability of financial support is one of the big issues that nonprofits are grappling with in terms of bringing in those much needed discretionary dollars, especially with cutbacks in government funding. How do you communicate effectively with constituents, volunteers, and donors? And as I said before, the volunteers, it's been very, very tough for the sector to kind of stay on top of their volunteers. How do we achieve greater diversity in staff and leadership? That's one of the big challenges, and it's been on the top of many nonprofit organizations' lists of things to do for 2021, is to try to make sure that their board of directors and their management team are reflective of the services and the constituents that they serve. So they're looking for increased diversity. And then continued need to advocate to funders and policymakers. You're in a situation where the old need to make sure that you're going and meeting with politicians and making sure that policymakers understand how important it is to continue to fund the nonprofit sector, and understand how important it is to continue to support what's happening in the sector. Because again, as government pulls back and as government does stuff, the sector becomes much more vital and much more needed. And right now, more than ever before with the pandemic, the sector is being tapped. And policymakers need to understand all of the good things that the sector is doing, and I don't know that they fully understand, because if they did, they wouldn't be cutting back the way they are. I know we have some questions. I'm going to try to jump in here. Is the webinar eligible for CPE? It will not be. We apologize. There are some new regulations regarding webinars and CPE, so we're working on trying to work those out. In terms of seamless with respect to video content, seamless meaning that a lot of times what happens if you don't have things set up the right way, people won't be able to see the video, it'll buffer. People have a very small attention span. And if the video doesn't load up right away, if it takes too long for a video to load up, they're not going to watch it. So you want to make sure that that it's a seamless process. They click on it, the video loads, they're able to watch the video. One of the things that and I'm going to go back to videos a second. One of the things that I think would be kind of a cool idea for some nonprofit organizations. I mean, you have all of these reality TV shows that are out there. And it might be interesting to, not necessarily do a reality TV show for your nonprofit organization, but, again, really show a little bit more about what's happening behind the scenes in terms of some of these nonprofit organizations, what's happening, and maybe follow the life of one of your constituents. Maybe, if someone's going through a tough surgery or going through something, and this organization's helping, or the organization's helping to build a ramp for somebody. Go through and tell the story. What's the issue that the person's having? How did the organization step in? What did that mean to the individual? I think all of those things are very helpful if done in a great, quick way. In terms of outlook regarding support from foundations, again, I think with the stock market up, I think foundations have more resources. And I think what you'll be able to see is that you should see hopefully an uptick in the donations from foundations, because again, I think there's more resources available there. Okay, that's it for the questions I had there. I'm going to try to go into the chat and see if there's anything in the chat that looking to see what else we got here. Again, one thing I do want to bring up, someone's reminding me within the chat. I want to thank the Nonprofit Resource Hub, who was a strategic partner in terms of helping us to put together this survey, and also in terms of supporting this event today. So I do want to thank all my friends at the Nonprofit Resource Hub for kind of helping. And again, for those of you who don't know about the Nonprofit Resource Hub, we do recommend you go to the website. It's a network of businesses that work heavily within the nonprofit sector, who push information out to the nonprofit sector. Their goal is really to provide education and ongoing information to the nonprofit sector, so that the nonprofit sector can benefit. Somebody asked, I'm hearing that the SBA approvals may take longer this round. Do you have any info on that? I don't, Eileen. We don't know how long it's going to take. Some of the applications have just started going in, so we should know within the next 2 weeks or so in terms of whether that whether it's going to take longer or whether it's going to be consistent. We will be sending out a recording of this if anybody wants to review this or pass it on to other people. So I think we're up by way of time. Again, wish we could be sharing this time in person as opposed to doing it this way, but I do thank everyone for participating, and until next time, take care, everyone.